Good afternoon, everyone. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Okay, so we have some internet sleuthing and some tasty, delicious tea for you this morning. Pull up your coffee cup or whatever it is that you're drinking and sit down and enjoy because this was a fun adventure for me. We know that this past week on the current season of Sister Wives, Kody Brown made a statement about how he was going to purchase property no matter what, even if that meant that he would have to dissolve the partnership in agreement with Robyn. Fans were sort of divided about what this statement meant. Some people said that they just had this agreement that they always had to make choices together and that he wasn't actually discussing dissolving their marriage, but rather dissolving their agreement that they make joint decisions. That didn't really make any sense to me because you don't have to dissolve an agreement. That's not a word you would use. You don't dissolve that in order to make a choice. So other people on the other end of the spectrum believe that the dissolve of partnership statement that he made directly related to him claiming that he was going to file papers to end their marriage. Now, after some internet sleuthing and some help from some of my subscribers that live in the state of Arizona, I want to let you know why he made this statement and why we know for sure that he was talking about the end of his marriage. Because the state of Arizona has a specific law for property. And the property law is that it's a community property state. So that means that any property other than a gift or inheritance you and your spouse acquired during the marriage belong equally to both parties, and any joint debts incurred during the marriage are equally responsible for both parties. Thus, it does not matter whether one spouse worked during the marriage and the other did not. Community property can include real estate, personal property, money, stocks, bonds, parties' interest, and employment-sponsored profit sharing or pension plan or individual retirement plan. Okay? So that means that in the state of Arizona, he is actually required to, if he's going to purchase property, both he and Robyn have to be on the title. So there's a number of states that are in the United States that have this, but so if they were to get divorced, basically it would mean that when either spouse files for a divorce, all the community property must be divided into separate property, so each spouse is allocated a certain equitable amount of the property. In addition, all community debt must be equitably divided. The term equitable means that each spouse is entitled to roughly half of the community property and debts. It usually does not matter who paid for the property directly, whose credit it was purchased under, or who uses the property most of the time. If the parties cannot agree about a division of the community property and the community debts, then the court will make a division of the property of those debts. And then property that was received as a gift by one particular spouse or that was an inheritance by one particular spouse is not generally considered community property. Also, property that is either spouse bought or acquired or paid for before the marriage is also generally not considered property. So here are sort of the guidelines, and there's a number of states that have these requirements. So Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin. So if you and your spouse live in a community property state, this means that all the assets you gain during your marriage are owned by both of you. And if you're in a community property state, you want to leave your spouse off the mortgage, you can do that. However, if you're applying for certain loans, their debt will be a part of that. They can't, however, not have the spouse on the title. So whoever buys the property, whether they use like Kody's credit or Robyn's credit or their joint income, Robyn would still have to be on the title and the deed of the property of everything. So because of this requirement, she has to sign off on any purchases that he makes and has to agree to any purchases that he makes for property. So when we look at the overall property that this family owns, here's what I found. And you'll see sort of a pattern here. They own a number of different properties, including the properties at Coyote Pass, a house for Robyn, and a house for Janelle. And then a separate piece of property adjacent to the property of Kody and Robyn's home. So you'll see that for instance, this is the house that he and Christine owned. Now, in order to buy that and just have him and Christine on there, Robyn had to grant Kody. So she was the grantor and the grantee of deed. So she basically granted Kody the deed of that property so that she would not be on that property. So she basically had to gift it to him. Because if she gifts it to him, then it's his property, not hers, and then it wouldn't be considered part of their divorce. And then they appear to do this in almost all of their homes. So this was another one of the properties where she grants it to him and he's the grantee. And this is for Janelle's property. And they purchased it under a LLC called Who, which appears to be an LLC that was set up by the family, I believe, to be a company that's purchasing the property. So they transferred it from Who to Kody and Janelle, and then Robyn gifted the rest of it to Kody. So they do this there, and see there's her granting and deeding it to Kody. And this is on every single one of their purchases. You'll see her granting and her being the grantor, him being the grantee. Same thing with his property for Mary and Janelle. And this, again, they're using the Who LLC to set up it as the company. So that's the company that buys it. And then they transfer it from the company they've started to the people. And then Robyn grants it to Kody as a gift. Again. And you'll see this on every single, and even on the home that Christine purchased, it's the same thing. So she does it on every single property. So a lot of people were wondering, why is Robyn on every single person's property in this family? Why is it all about Robyn? Well, now we know that in the state of Arizona, she has to sign off on any single purchase that her husband makes. Not only that, she has to be on the title and the deed. The only way she can get around that is if it's gifted to her husband, or if it's purchased under a business and that she wouldn't be included in as the business partner. So they have found some crafty ways to get her off of deeds that put him as the primary owner of the properties. But in terms of if they were going to buy their own home, if he's going to buy a home for her and him, she would have to agree to it, which is why she had leverage in the situation where she was saying, I'm not going to give up. This is not what I want to do. I don't want to put money into this home. And then he says, well, then I'll dissolve the partnership. Because he knows that he can't purchase a home for the two of them unless she agrees, because she has to sign on that title. So he really was threatening to divorce her if she did not purchase property. Think about that. Think about being in a situation that's very highly stressful and you have your husband saying, because it's a community property state and you know that your wife has to be on the mortgage and has to agree to the purchase, and your wife is saying, I'm not going to sign anything. I'm not going to purchase it. And then your spouse says, well, I'm going to divorce you then and I'm just going to buy it, whatever. And then he goes on to the network and says, I'm going to dissolve my partnership in agreement. He's lying. His partnership that he had to dissolve if he was going to buy that house, he would have had to divorce her. So he was absolutely threatening to divorce her, and it was because he knew he couldn't purchase property as long as he was married to her, as long as she didn't want to do it. So this is a man, which then gets me back to this point about fans saying that it was Mary's choice to like the reason why they divorced, he divorced Mary was because of Robyn's kids, and that Mary agreed to it, and that, you know, she was fine with it. I say no, absolutely not. What wife in their right mind, think about that. What legal wife in their right mind would divorce their husband so they could marry somebody else unless their husband said, you're going to do it or else? It makes no sense at all for them to divorce unless Kody is saying, I'm going to divorce you and you're going to sign it. Much like he wants to buy the house and he says, if you don't buy the house, Robyn, I'm going to divorce you. So this is an example of Kody using his manipulative tactics and his really complete and utter disregard for what a marital union is. To him, a legal marriage literally means, if you don't sign it, I'll get rid of it. If you don't do it, I'll get rid of it. And then imagine the pressure that puts on the woman that is the legal wife. She knows that at any time, if she doesn't comply to him, she doesn't give him what he wants, she doesn't do exactly what he wants, that he can pull his support and he can divorce her and he'll marry someone else. Because there's 3 other women that would gladly be his legal wife, because legal wives have rights to estates, to life insurance, to health insurance. They have tax benefits. There's way more benefit to being the legal wife than to being the concubine or the girlfriend or whatever you want to call it, because none of these other women that are involved with Kody are his wives. We have to be honest about that. Christine is not his wife. Janelle is not his wife. And Mary is not his wife. They are basically girlfriends of him that he has on the side that he pretends are his spiritual wives. It's pretty gross if you think about it. So I would say, someone in chat asked, is he financially abusing his wives? I would say, if you are making a threat, in my opinion, to a spouse that if you don't do what I say financially, I'm going to divorce you, I would constitute that as a form of abuse 100%. And if he is leveraging finances over his wives' heads as a means to control them and to keep them compliant, I would also say that's a form of abuse. So yes, this is why when we talk about Kody Brown and this show, we can't just talk about physical DV. We have to talk about the emotional, psychological, spiritual, financial aspects of what DV looks like in these relationships. So she eventually signs and buys a property, but you can guarantee that she didn't want to do that, and she had to buy that property because Kody was going to divorce her if she didn't. So that's what I've got for today. And this means that these women don't have the rank, the voice, or whatever it is that they want. If they are not the legal wife, they don't have any. Christine, from a legal perspective, Christine and Janelle and Mary have zero safety. Anything that they walk into with him is not going to be recognized on a legal perspective. They're not, any property that they buy with him would not be considered joint property because they're not married. So Kody basically keeps everything, and the other wives keep nothing, or the other girlfriends. Let's be honest. Let's just call them the girlfriends. All right, so that's what we got. No, they would not qualify for common law. They would not qualify for alimony because it's illegal to have more than one wife, regardless if it's a common law wife or a legal wife. Common law is effectively a legal way to say that somebody is a wife. You can only legally have one wife, no matter which way you skin the cat, okay? So that's what I've got for now. All right, let me know what your thoughts are. Does this surprise you, shock you, or are you like, now this makes sense? All right, I'll be back with more later today. Bye, guys. Oh, and make sure, if you haven't yet, watch my interview with Clint Brady and his friend Genevieve from Love After Lockup. I did that yesterday. That is it's in the channel, and I will add a card up here at the end of this video once the video is processed. All right, you guys, bye.